Everybody, Matt Geary here for the Geek Pride cast on this Monday evening. With me, as always, we have my co-host, Peter Ray Allison.
Good evening, everyone.
And he returns! He returneth, as he said he would, Mike Holik.
Thank you guys so much for having me back. It was
such a pleasure
last time.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure. So, Mike, we have so much that's gone on. And when was it you were with us? Was it January?
It was the tail end of January, I believe.
Yeah. So it's only been a few months, but a lot has happened. So obviously we spent an entire hour and a half, nearly 2 hours, I think, talking about the OGL. Loads has happened with that since. And then obviously we're talking about your new Kickstarter, which sounds very exciting. Yeah. So
it is a wild one. We got to talk about it just a little bit last time, and I'm thrilled to kind of get into this ridiculous project we've bitten off.
Okay, so what? Well, dealer's choice. In fact, for anybody who wasn't listening to the first episode with you in it, who is it? Who are you? What do you do? What's your thing?
Yeah, so my name is Mike. I am the editor-in-chief of Mage Hand Press. We make content for D&D 5e. Our first big book was a sci-fi conversion called Dark Matter, and our next book was Valda's Spire of Secrets, which was a book that just expanded 5e with 10 new base classes and 150 subclasses. And now we're on to a project called The Book of Extinction, which takes real extinct animals and then reimagines them as fantasy creatures that you can play within your D&D game. It's a D&D book that has an actual science consultant. We partnered with the Center for Biological Diversity.
Oh, wow.
It's really neat. And in addition to all of that, earlier this year, I was one of the voices helping to push back against Wizards of the Coast during the OGL 1.1 chaos. I wrote an open letter that got over 75,000 signatures. And since then we had these major developments that Wizards of the Coast not just like backed down, they took the existing 5e content, the SRD, and put it straight into Creative Commons, which basically gives us D&D 5e forever, no matter what they do. I mean, they backed off so hard. I mean, it is an unmitigated victory for open gaming everywhere.
Okay, so I was like, dealer's choice. We can talk about the Kickstarter first, and we can talk about D&D. But like, we're kind of talking about it, so we'll do that, and then we'll end with your glorious Kickstarter at the end. So
sure,
we talked about this at the start. The OGL, it had the entire nerd world up in uproar. You yourself, you wrote an open letter. It got a lot of traction. There was a lot of kickback about this thing, and we went into great detail. Or yourself, you went into very good detail about the entire thing, what it meant for us, what it meant for D&D players, and now, like you said, they have completely retreated from what they said they were going to do. So can you explain to us what they have done and why you think they've done this?
The why is extremely complicated, and I don't know that anyone knows for sure. I keep talking to a writer from Bloomberg who keeps asking me, like, why do you think they're doing this? It doesn't, like, both the original move and the full retraction are both really confounding. Essentially, previously, Wizards of the Coast was trying to take D&D as we know it and lock it up in a way where if you're going to make content for D&D, Wizards of the Coast was going to extract your intellectual property, a lot of your funds, if you're big enough to actually make a living out of it, and basically kind of strip virtual tabletops and other gaming aids out of the space completely, to monopolize all of that space. And there were pretty catastrophic consequences for that if it actually went through. And I think a lot of people understood it in a way that was really heartening, because these are sort of technical licensing things. After basically a month of constant backlash from the community and very little communication on Wizards of the Coast's part, from what we heard through the grapevine, people were fired, people were hired, Paramount was called, Paramount got angry. understandably. And, Wizards of the Coast not only doubled back and like changed their communication style around this, putting Chris Cox kind of as like the spokesperson, where before they just didn't really have an individual spokesperson. They've sort of doubled back and taken the content of D&D 5e that lets you make stuff for the game, like I do, like I've been doing for years, and put that in Creative Commons. So it's essentially public domain. Anyone can make stuff for D&D 5e in perpetuity without Wizards of the Coast being able to revoke that in any way that is meaningful. They, of course, still own their branding. You can't call it Dungeons and Dragons. That's sort of expected because of U.S. copyright law. There's no way that would like change in a meaningful way. But this is a massive win. I can continue to make stuff that builds on and expands on D&D 5th edition as long as there's an audience there, which potentially speaks to Wizards of the Coast's, thinking that the next edition is going to be such a strong and successful edition that it draws everyone away from 5e, and this sort of move was kind of unnecessary. It's just a legacy move. I think that we're going to end up in a very complex location around that very soon, depending on how good 6th edition is and whether or not people go to it, and what Wizards of the Coast tries to do to creators who are, building stuff for that game.
Do you think there's going to be a 6th edition anytime?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Okay. Through the grapevine, they're calling it D&D 1 because they want to say it's completely backwards compatible. It's the same game. We've just changed some things here and there, and we've changed all of the classes and all of the base rules, and whoops, it's a different edition. I've heard through the grapevine that they have legitimate legal reasons that they need to make it a new edition, that it has to do with their acquisition of D&D Beyond. And that that's the reason it has to be a new edition. It was a way because D&D Beyond only had a license for 5th edition. So by sort of creating a new edition, they were able to bring fandom, the people who made and owned D&D Beyond until recently, to the table to sell it. Otherwise, I mean, they had a good thing going. There was no reason for the parent company of D&D Beyond to sell it to Wizards of the Coast. That is the story I've heard from an insider. It tracks with everything we've heard. It tracks with the design decisions they're making with 6e, that a lot of the choices around like spell lists are kind of obtuse and really only work if you have a digital guide that can sort your spells out in an algorithmic way. That sort of stuff,
Yeah, I've heard that apparently there's going to be like a subscription model for D&D 1 Beyond, whatever it's going to be called now, and that kind of just lock people into that infrastructure.
They want to have a subscription model that looks a little more like Netflix as opposed to a traditional model that looks like buying DVDs, which makes sense even if they piss off 50% of their audience. If they can squeeze everybody else for 300% or 500% more revenue, that is a win. So I mean, it's not a win. It's a massive loss for consumers everywhere. But from a strictly profit-centric, and I think since the OGL thing has popped off, we have a much greater insight into what is going on at Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. Hasbro doesn't want to lose Wizards of the Coast as a subsidiary stock. Like, Wizards of the Coast is a very large company owned by Hasbro. In fact, by some estimates, it makes 60 to 70% of all of Hasbro's money.
Yeah.
People in the finance stock game would really love to see Wizards of the Coast be its own stock, separate from Hasbro, which would allow it to kind of flourish without Hasbro's oversight. Which means Hasbro is trying very hard to show that it is contributing value to Wizards of the Coast. So there's this complex stock money-based reasoning behind why we still expect shenanigans from 6th edition. We still expect D&D Beyond to get more and more money grubby as time goes on, and that the D&D movie is hopefully going to it seems like they're really hoping that it bolsters their levels of support going into these sorts of decisions.
And I mean, like Wizards of the Coast decision to lock the 5e rules into Creative Commons is a massive swerve. Rather than just retracting the initial statement, they've gone back even further.
Yes,
and that's
are they just doing it kind of like it's a case of fine. It's it's a lost battle. You have it, and then we'll move on with something else. And then
I think they're trying to regain some trust.
Yeah.
Because it is really incalculable how much suspicion everything they do, like they've gained all this suspicion around everything they do at all times now, because a lot of the audience has learned that Wizards of the Coast is not to be trusted. I mean, that move was so craven and so directed. I think they're trying really hard to regain that audience, because they're about to ask them for a big value proposition. Go see our movie, review it well, and then spend $180 on 3 new core books for a system that is similar to the system that you already have, and also get a subscription to this service that's going to cost you $200 a year or more, which would be a pretty middle-ish ballpark of what we expect for like a monthly price. And that's to say nothing about, and convince all of your friends to do the same, because I don't know if it's likely that D&D Beyond is just going to charge one person in order to use these rules. It might just be charging for each player, which is a massive change in the way that economics of role-playing games.
How does that work for other virtual tabletops if you have to go through D&D Beyond?
This was the main question that we were left with at the end of, now we know 5th edition isn't going anywhere. So the question is whether or not 6th edition is going to be as locked down. The most popular virtual tabletops right now have nothing to do with D&D. Like D&D doesn't have a virtual tabletop, but again, rumor mill. I know people who do and have worked at D&D Beyond. The rumor mill suggests that they've had a virtual tabletop ready for 3 to 4 years, but they weren't allowed to deploy it for various reasons. The relationship between Wizards of the Coast and D&D Beyond before the acquisition was pretty adversarial. It was pretty detached, which feels kind of strange considering D&D Beyond had D&D's name on it.
Yeah.
But that was not a good work environment. And the sort of like being shackled to a company that has to approve all your decisions was not a very good thing for a lot of people who work there, which is why a lot of the higher ups have left. It's really hard to see what is going to happen with virtual tabletops. I think that's where Wizards of the Coast expects to make a lot of their money going forward, which potentially means they think that's the avenue by which they can put people like me out of business. I don't necessarily think that's the wisest or most forward-thinking thing to try to do. I mean, Wizards of the Coast is never going to make a book like the Book of Extinction, which is educational and about conservation and about history. They're not going to be partnering with conservation organizations to do that. So third-party creators bring a lot to this space that Wizards of the Coast could not even try to equal, so it's
I see.
Yeah,
I think it's like there's a for Warhammer 40k. There's a thing called Battle Scribe, which is an army builder, and it's free, and everybody uses it and has done for years. And Games Workshop turned around and went, "Oh, we've got this Warhammer Plus. It's kind of subscription thing, so you get a few more." So that's right. They got all the films from YouTube and stuff like that, and they put them in this thing and all the videos, and they went, "Oh, there's Warhammer Plus, and you get this army builder and stuff." And people just kind of went, "Yeah, we're not really that bothered," and just sort of kind of stuck with the free version. Which they had to change some names and stuff like that to make it sort of, so they could still use it.
Right.
But it hasn't done. I don't think the Warhammer Plus as it is really that popular, and I think it would be the same sort of thing here because
I think so as well. But it doesn't mean they can't find ways to squeeze. We live in a really unprecedented era of massive companies that have defined the landscape both technologically and culturally for the last few decades, beginning to consume themselves in an effort to stay financially solvent and relevant in an era where their speculative value is no longer keeping them afloat. This is true of Twitter. This is true of Facebook. And it's certainly, I think, becoming true of the major gaming companies, Games Workshop and Wizards of the Coast, who are looking at potentially rough financial times ahead and trying to find ways to maximize value going into that time. So I think we're going to see a lot of reducing features, increasing costs, and people just kind of choosing not to engage with it. As always, a good product brings consumers, and I don't think they're interested in making better products. They're interested in trying to find ways to capitalize quick because they know things may turn bad at any given year in the next 3 to 4 years.
Because I mean, they seem to be taking lessons from almost the software industry, where like you've gone from like a single one-off payment for some software that would last you X number of years until it's redundant, to a subscription model where you have to keep paying each year on and on for, you know, smaller payment than your initial outlay, but it soon racks up over time.
Season
And
passes.
investors are aware that that is a good stream of revenue.
Yeah.
So it's an easy explanation and an easy hook for those investors. So it's driven by normal profit-seeking motives. Nothing here is actually that surprising.
Yeah.
You know, if you know a lot about stocks and a lot about how companies tend to operate. So it's yet to be seen how this is going to play out in the long term. But for the moment, we've won a big victory. I think we still have a lot to be concerned about going forward. I think we have a lot to worry about. But right now, I think we're in a good spot.
Well, this sort of kind of ties in with what you said, that there's a lot of suspicion about them now. Like, if you were to say Wizards of the Coast to me even last year, you know, I wouldn't put them up there with the big sort of Machiavellian, dastardly sort of companies. You know, they were just the guys who did Dungeons and Dragons, and that, you know, that sort of Dungeons and Dragons is great, and there's not a lot of sort of, and now because of that, there is literally every motive, everything they do, there seems to be motive. It's like, why are they doing that? There's questions. There's sort of like, is there anything underhanded going on here? Is it all about the money? Whereas those questions were definitely not in my mind. Even
exactly, I didn't know
ago.
anything about. I've worked, you know, writing D&D stuff for years. I knew nothing about how Hasbro's relationship to the you know, the stockholders, you know, influenced Wizards of the Coast decision making until now. And I think that I'm not the only person who has kind of internalized a huge amount of that knowledge in a way that is, you know, it just creates more skepticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, what also apparent is that media organizations like Bloomberg are starting going, so what's exactly D&D and what's going on? Which I find is absolutely fascinating. From like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, you wouldn't be having this conversation, but
it's
now
big business now. It's
it is
big business. And you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody, you know, making stuff for D&D also makes Hasbro money, but it does mean that we are adjacent to that larger space. And the fact that people are able to make successful third-party books and third-party accessories that you know, have Kickstarters that raise multiple millions of dollars is significant in and of itself. There's not a lot of other industries that can say that independent voices are making millions of dollars on Kickstarter within their space, you know, without paying major royalties.
I think they've got to be really careful with themselves going forward, because I think,
yeah, especially because the D&D brand right now, especially given the film, is very profitable. Which I can see if like any miscommunications from Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast could soon change their fortune, so to speak.
Well, I think they've got to learn a lot from the video game industry. You know, microtransactions and things like that have gone and bitten a lot of sort of AAA companies in the ass, and they've got to be very careful what they do, because they could do they could push it too far, and people would just go, yeah, fuck you guys, you know, we're just not interested, and you know, that'll be it.
And you're 100% right. And there's this different value proposition for Dungeons and Dragons that I don't think that Wizards of the Coast fully understands. That like, it's a game that asks you to put a ton of work into it and like reap those rewards, you know, in return. That's why it's always been so much cheaper than video games and, you know, comparable sorts of war games like Warhammer 40K. It's because one person buys the books and then everyone puts in a ton of effort to create this thing spontaneously. There are cheaper ways to accomplish what a role-playing game does. You know, if you're trying to, you know, it's always like people get into D&D when they're in college and high school because they have no spending money. Only one person had to get the books. if they're changing that into a subscription service, I think they're going to realize that it sort of takes the legs out from them, and no amount of like whales coming in because they got really excited about the D&D movie and want to role play Chris Pine. Those people aren't necessarily going to offset a very frustrated horde of people who are used to a business model and a type of product that they've enjoyed for decades.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and this is like a hobby that, as you say, has a relatively low cost of entry. Only one person needs to buy the books, or you could split the cost between your friends, and that's it. All you need then is a pencil, paper, and the imagination.
It's like
and free time.
Yeah, so
tons of free time.
Like I try to be sort of rational when it comes to big companies and stuff. Like people moan about Games Workshop a lot, and people moan about big companies. In the end, they're companies. They need to make money. If they don't make money, then they can't provide you with the stuff that you love. So there has to be a happy sort of kind of medium. There has to be a good middle ground in there. They do need to make profit. They need to have enough profit to keep their investors sort of happy, blah, blah, blah. But they don't want to be too greedy about it, because then that gets to a point where you're just like, well, I'm not interested. So there has to be a good sort of happy medium with them. If they push it too far, then people will just go, yeah, fuck you guys. I'm done. And one of the things D&D always had, like you've both mentioned, is it wasn't cheap for me, because I went out and I bought all the books, and I've got all the different ancillary things, all the map makers and all the other things that sort of kind of go in and stuff. So there's lots of things that you spend a lot of money on. But for the grand scheme of things, people don't sort of need all those things.
At its core, all it needs is 3 books: Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual. That's it.
Yeah, and
the game requires so much personal input. If you want additional options, you can create them.
Yeah.
It's not like a video game where there's software and there's hardware. It's literally software. Like the game's rules are software that run on people.
Yeah.
So you have to take that it requires so much human effort to conjure these worlds and create the kind of niche cases that the rules don't address, that it has to be at a lower cost, because people are putting time in. Any hobby that requires a ton of your time will have to cost, a more reasonable amount. So I don't know. I think that's where potentially we're going to see Wizards of the Coast fumble. In the meantime, and if they do fumble, we have 5th edition. I get to continue making stuff here. The audience isn't going anywhere. I think they're going to continue to buy books for 5th edition. Wizards of the Coast could even double back and say, we're going to keep making stuff for that.
Maybe they will. Fumbled. Maybe they'll try. They'll take the punt they'll do that sort of kind of soft launch with 6th edition or D&D 1 and kind of go, oh, this subscription thing, there's all these cool things. See how it goes, and if they don't push it too much, and then they go, okay, right, that's not working out. We'll slide back to good old 5th edition and sort of kind of carry on with that. And that's sort of, I think, would be a safer way to do it for them, instead of going balls deep and sort of going all in for this one, and then it just crashing and burning, and then kind of going, everybody thinking they're just money grabbing bastards. And
there's tons of good guy ways they can approach it.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
So I don't think it's worth saying, well, they're definitely going to stab us in the back, but it is worth mentioning that everyone in the audience now knows they're capable of it, and they might do it again.
Exactly, and that's it.
So,
and that's their biggest issue. They have put that doubt in a lot of very trusting people's minds. Like I said, 3 months ago, I had zero doubts about them whatsoever. Now it's like you question everything they're doing, because you're just like, well, they've done it before. They might do it again. And even if you have sort of come back with all these nice things and you've tried to make good for them, everybody still does not fully trust you. And so you've got to make a lot of work to gain that trust back. I don't think you'll ever fully retain it. I don't think you'll fully get it back. There's always going to be that thing in the back of people's minds where you're just like, yeah, are they doing this for ulterior motives?
I think everything they do is under so much scrutiny right now. They announced a creator summit in which they only invited basically media personalities, a few people who were also creating other stuff, but they didn't invite me. They didn't invite the other people who publish hardcover books on the regular, and they called it a creator summit. And that got the internet in just a fervor, because they didn't wait long enough to wait for it to really simmer down. They can't. They need to talk up their movie. So I think they're just, they're walking through a field of rakes, and every time they take a wrong step, it's going to smack them in the face, and there's nothing they can do to stop
That's a good analogy. I like that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so basically, they just kind of need to watch themselves for a significant amount of time almost, and just kind of play it nice and not try to do anything too money grabby.
Yeah. On that note, should we transition to talk about
absolutely.
like a weirdly charitable thing? I don't want to say this is fully charitable, because Kickstarter doesn't let me donate money straight to charities, via the campaign. But we're promoting conservation, and we've made a book that in partnership with a charitable organization.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so cool. we briefly talked about this before, but yeah, explain. Carry on.
So the Book of Extinction is mostly a bestiary of extinct animals. And we tell you the exact story in about a page and a half of what that animal was and what happened to them. And then we give you a stat block to use it like a beast. So a druid can summon it, a wizard can use it as a familiar, regular stat block. So if that is a bear, we're basically giving you a bear stat block, maybe changed a little bit based on how this animal is slightly different from a brown bear or something like that. And then we reimagine that animal based on the cultural significance that it had, or the legacy it left behind. Some of these animals were very, very culturally significant to entire continents, entire peoples. And those legacies still kind of echo around. And then in other cases, they became famous after their demise. The dodo is a really good example of this. Yeah. So, when we adapt the dodo, it becomes a Lewis Carroll inspired Feywild creature that can confuse and baffle people by saying ridiculous words and doing ridiculous things. Yeah, it's a really interesting book. We also threw in dead races, which are you get to play an endling, which it's a grim term if you're not aware of it. An endling is the very last of its kind.
Oh yeah,
you talked about this in the last podcast, because it's a really, if you didn't hear this, so explain about them.
So an endling is the very last of its kind. So a good example of this is if you talk about the white rhino right now. It is not extinct, but there's only 2 left, and they're both female. So the white rhino is going extinct. So in the present, we can talk about Najin and Fatu, the last 2 white rhinos. They're endlings. They're the very last of their kind. And even if we engineered some mad science to create a breeding experiment or a cloning thing, they're so small. Like the numbers are so small. I mean, we're down to 2 that are confirmed in the entire world. Always, and they're the most well-protected animals in the entire world. Men with machine guns watch them at all times. Even if we manage to get a breeding experiment going, it doesn't matter. We're too far gone. I mean, you could get 5-10 of them, and the numbers are too small to survive. And you can't really breed them to high enough numbers in captivity. Their lifespans are too long. Creatures, big animals don't live well in captivity. So, this is an intractable problem. Those are endlings now. They're going to go extinct. So in order to help kind of embody this idea and help you role play out some extinction, you can choose a race, and we put 5 in the book, and then we have of endlings. It's a new race, but you're the last one. So we have statue people called the Kori, who are, hiding amongst classical antiquity statues because they've been hunted to near extinction by gargoyles. They're hated rivals. We have the Lob, which is a fuzzy kind of house spirit. It's actually one of the few kind of house spirits that hasn't been adapted into D&D already. The Lob is, we envision as this big kind of furry, almost like walking bear with a reptile tail that is just kind of a gentle little house spirit, and was exiled from the Feywild, and ever since has been trying to survive on the material plane, where everyone thinks it's a lycanthrope or a demon or something else that should be slain. So they just try to be friendly and make friends with people, and that's not going so well. So they're endlings now. And then we have more on that list, which we can go into in detail.
You got the Paleo. I'm looking at your Kickstarter. You got the Paleo.
Oh, perfect.
The Paleo Sapien.
I'm so thrilled about the Paleo Sapiens. Yeah. They're raptor people with feathers and fabric. They're people that existed before humanoids dominated the material plane. So they're dinosaur-like. And D&D has a weird relationship with dinosaurs, but I wanted to make a people that were really vibrant and really present. And they weren't like banging rocks together. They had fabric, they had tools, they had culture, and they had gods, and all of that is just kind of quietly gone, away as their numbers have dwindled, along with the dinosaurs in a fantasy game. If you present dinosaurs in your game, they're probably not abundant. They're probably isolated in small pockets of the world, like deep in underground or on plateaus somewhere on isolated continents. So we're kind of presenting this as a type of humanoids that lived alongside those dinosaurs and have gone, very quickly extinct. And the artist did a wonderful job bringing those to life. And the last one is our primordial elves. If you know anything about D&D lore, there's like a bunch of elven subraces, and they're all supposed to come from like a single type of elf that was created by the gods. And then, depending on which fantasy setting you're in, there's something that caused them to split. So we liked the idea that there are some elves that were not split into subraces. And we aesthetically imagined them as sort of an Afrofuturist, aesthetic. And they look very, very cool. And, so it's an elf with some divine characteristics, a little bit of divine spell casting. It's just super, super neat to kind of capture that aesthetic as an elf, which is something that not a lot of people kind of, approach. And I was so thrilled to tackle that.
Yeah. So as an endling, what quality does that give the character background?
Mechanically?
Yeah.
Well, you have to choose. So in a mechanical sense, it doesn't change much.
Right.
We made them a hair stronger than a regular race, but not by much. Races shouldn't define the way that you play. Your class does. So that design kind of constraint hasn't really left. The big thing is that you have to decide. The one big thing is that if you die, you go extinct. And, just as if I said, we were talking about the white rhino. If somebody managed to cobble together some mad science and get a few more white rhinos into the world, that doesn't mean they're not going extinct. There are forces that drive things extinct, right? If there's no place for them to live safely and reproduce in good numbers, if there's no prey, if there's no habitat, you go extinct anyway. It doesn't matter how many of them there are. That's how this works. So the idea that we're using to reinforce that concept is that if you die and you are the last one, you are severed from resurrection. Magic can't bring you back. You're gone forever.
That is
because I think it emphasizes the finality of extinction, and it's something that we need to internalize.
Yeah, that's a very powerful thing to have, because obviously
it's scary.
Yeah. And it is.
And it's technically a massive debuff in a mechanical sense, but the idea is that you chose to be this. You chose to embody this. And I think it's important that you get, a fair chance to see the consequences of that. Because this book is about those sorts of consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just like playing endling in a game where you can be resurrected almost negates that, I say. So kind of removing that from the character, suddenly it exposes them and kind of reinforces the nature of them.
Well, that sort of ties in, because recently, we've had some turmoil in our D&D campaign. Pete's character was killed. He had to leave, so his character was killed off. And as soon as he was sort of down and dying, people were running up to him. I cast resurrect, and I do this, and it's trying to bring him back. And he had to go. Look, I'm too tired. I don't want to carry on. He had to do that spiel to sort of kind of get the whole thing of like, I don't want it. I can't carry on. So
don't do that.
Don't bring me back. I'm dead. But then we did another thing where there was like the funeral for him, and all this shit happened, and I made it hard for them because I didn't want them sort of attacking the big guy. I wanted them to sort of kind of, maybe have a bit of a spar with him and then let him go. So, but they didn't. They carried on, and a load of people got killed. And then afterwards, and I was just like, I made it very hard for them, and a load of people got killed, including a lot of the NPCs, which they had as like tag-alongs. But then afterwards, they're just like, I'm going to cast resurrect on this person, I'm going to do this, and it sort of took the edge off it slightly, because it was just like there was no real consequence to that then, because a lot of them are being brought back. Now I made it so like they couldn't resurrect everybody and stuff, but it was just like it does, having that mechanic was like, if you die because you're an endling, that's it. You're not only dead, but your entire species / race does not exist anymore. And that's really powerful. That's really powerful.
It's yeah, and we also have the chapter opens with a case study saying, by the way, you don't have to play one of these fantasy races. Like, this is a really neat way to introduce a new race where you don't have to explain why your fantasy setting hasn't addressed these people that are statues before. Well, they're so few that you didn't know they existed, or you thought they were a legend or something like that. So that's a clean way to introduce it, but you can just use humans. What if you play in a fantasy setting in which humans are basically gone? You're the last one. So you can play a human fighter or a boring human wizard, like nothing too crazy, and kind of still access that tension and that tragedy to explore what it is like to be the last man on Earth, in which there's still elves and dwarves and dragonborn, but humans are gone, which is a nice inversion of normal fantasy settings in which humans are so everywhere, it's weird to see anything else.
Yeah.
What's been the kind of player reaction when you've been play testing the endlings? What's been the player reaction to
I haven't gotten to play test the endlings yet. I'm really excited about them. But I haven't gotten them to the table yet. I actually a good chunk of the monsters in this book I haven't gotten to play test. About half of them I have. And they're really interesting. But I don't want to push any players into rolling one of these up. I want to see how they feel about kind of biting that off. It has to be a very personal choice, because it's suddenly a much more emotive character than you would play by default.
Yeah, because you're much more vulnerable. I mean, you have no resurrection. There's no comeback.
And how do you play that? Do you play it as like, I am the last one of my kind, I'm going to show off what made us so special and amazing? Or are you going to be very careful because when you die, that's it? And you need to see if there's any possible hope, if there's any possible chance, you need to protect yourself to see that. How do you engage with it? I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's too tragic of a question.
That's such a good thing. Is having I'm just thinking about it, and having something like that. That would be like if I was to play a character, an endling, it would be like an ultimate sacrifice. That would be an epic way to sort of end. If Draken, Pete's character just hit me in an endless, like, I'm doing this, I know it's going to be the end of my race, it's going to be the end of everything, but I'm doing it for the greater good, for the people here.
To go out with a bang, not a whimper.
Yeah, and I just think that would be so epic. So epic.
It's filled with so many storytelling possibilities, and that's why when the moment this was suggested in a writing session, we went, it has to be that.
How did this come about exactly? You mentioned it was suggested in a writing session.
I have one co-writer with me on this. He's the lead on this project, Lucas Zellers, who is a really brilliant writer who came to me with this idea years ago and said, "Hey, Mike, I want to start a Kickstarter, to fund this project. What's the best way to go about that?" And I was like, there is no good way to go about writing a monster book for your first book. They're very expensive on a page-by-page basis compared to regular books. Every single monster I put in the book, every 2 pages or so, I have to get a piece of art, bespoke piece of art of this, and it has to look like those animals. For a lot of the animals in this book, there are no modern artistic impressions of them at all. So we have to be very, very true to what these animals looked like and how we think they would have acted. So it's not an easy artistic challenge. It's certainly not an easy financial challenge. And I think if you're doing it right, you need to have resources. So I told him, the correct way to do this is to bring me on board. I want to do this project. I think it gives us a chance to do something good, like objectively good. I've made really cool expansions to 5e. We expanded into sci-fi. We expanded the book with 10 new base classes, or the game 10 new base classes. But this gave us a chance to change the way that people tell their stories a little bit. Like, if you're playing a game in which you kill an owlbear, you've never really asked the question if that's the last owlbear or how many owlbears are left.
I was just
or if
reading
the thing you did was wrong
on your Kickstarter. Yeah.
So we're doing a little adventure called The Last Owlbear, in which in a near future, the owlbears have been hunted to basically extinction. And you tell of the last one, and you have to go capture it, protect it, and then fend off hunters that would love to put it on their wall, as you try to bring it somewhere for sort of a last ditch breeding program. And I'm going to tell you, we haven't finished writing that adventure. We haven't decided how to address whether or not that is ultimately successful, because the book is simultaneously about like the tragedy of extinction, like the tragedy of how all of this happens, and taking a look at history in a way that you haven't really been taught. Like the idea that all these animals that were like really big and important were just around in the past and now they're not, is not something you're really taught in school. But simultaneously, it's a book about hope. It's a book about conservation. It's a book about how we change things for the better and what we can do to push back against these trends. And, you know, working with, I mean, one of the most prominent conservation organizations of our time has been a real boon for that. We always, you know, have somebody to ask about, like, okay, how do we, like, what is the silver lining on this one? How do we, like, these stories get a little grim, but we found, I think, at every turn, ways to make them hopeful and inspiring and useful for the reader.
Yeah, I mean, it would be best described this as not just a monster manual. This is like almost a, you know, a player's guide, a GM guide, as much as a.
It is.
Manual.
It has players options. This comes from my you know, history of making a lot of players options. We have 12 subclasses, one for each class, that, you know, draw from nature and have this sort of, you know, really interesting edge to them. We have you know, 5 races. We're potentially going to add 2 more as stretch goals. Lots of people have asked me about it. Yeah, and then it's a lot of prompts for the DM to know how to implement these monsters in a game. So plot hooks, and also there's an entire chapter about monster extinctions, like how. So not just the owlbear, but we break down in the same way that the IUCN, who creates the red lists that classifies animals as extinct or endangered, it breaks down monsters in the same way, talking about their threats, how they're utilized, and conservation actions you can take to prevent these monsters from going extinct, which is really just sort of a world building exercise that you can tap into to make your games that much more realistic and engaging, so that you can kind of take some of this thought about conservation and act it out in a realistic way.
What was the reaction to the conservation program when you approached them with this idea?
I think that, well, so we actually reached out to a whole bunch of different organizations, and about half of them went, we have no idea what that means. And this is one where, I mean, there is an overlap in academia and biology majors and D&D folks. In fact, the whole project's success hinges on that being a good overlap, you know? And we found, you know, the Center for Biological Diversity, they were like, yeah, our staff is thrilled. Like, we love D&D. Like, we're working for this awesome nonprofit. Obviously, we want to support you in any way that we can. And they've given us a science consultant, someone who's falling down these research rabbit holes with us and lending a huge amount of expertise to help make sure that these topics are presented in the right way, that we're not, you know, fumbling anything really badly, that our ideas are presented really clearly. And it has been just a fantastic experience. It's like having an editor who can tell you whether or not things are scientifically sound.
Okay, and also you mentioned that you also kind of draw on the cultural background of each extinct animal as well.
Yeah.
Like, again, how did you kind of go about researching that, given like there's so much cultural diversity? I mean,
part of it is just which ones we choose.
Yeah.
So there's so many extinct animals to choose from. You have to start creating criteria, and because we know that we're going to reimagine these extinct animals, and we're also only limiting ourselves to animals that have gone extinct while humans have been around.
Yeah.
So we have an entire separate chapter for things that were big and cool and awesome before we came around and died off before we came around, right? That's an entire chapter. But for the ones that get like the spotlight, the ones that get, you know, these reimaginings, like the dodo and like you know, the thylacine, the ghost tiger of Tasmania, you know, we wanted to make sure that they had some real cultural impact. So, you know, if I'm looking at the table of contents of my like current build of the book, that's like 150 pages long. We want to get up to over 200, but for now we're currently at 150. The first thing in the bestiary section is the Atlas bear and the Atlas lion. So those were a lion and a bear from the Atlas Mountains. And if you know about lions in the Colosseum, they were taken from the Atlas Mountains in northern Africa by the tens of thousands. Huge numbers of them were captured and taken to the Colosseum to be slaughtered by the bestiarii, the gladiators who killed beasts. They were a specific type of gladiator who were the beast killers, which were different from the ones who were fed to beasts. And the Romans had names for these things. So those have this immediate cultural connotation. Lions and Colosseum, but you've probably never connected that those lions, that specific species, they're gone. They were all wiped out, and a combination of climate change and overutilization got rid of them. So we imagined them as pit beasts. They're these, they're imbued with the spirits of those who have died in the Colosseum, and they have this, gladiator instinct and intelligence and cunning and the ability to use maneuvers as if they were gladiators themselves. For both the Atlas bear and the Atlas lion. And then we present a template so you can turn any animal into a pit beast. So that's just one example of some plate. Like that's literally just the first one on the list, right? Of animals that have a lot more cultural impact than you would think, and reimagining them based on that cultural impact.
Have you kind of considered the impact of on the world and the characters of a species going extinct? So is there any kind of mechanical or game elements for a species going extinct during the game sessions or during the campaign?
We addressed that during the monster extinctions chapter, but we haven't solidified them into pure mechanical elements. There's these I can't remember exactly what the scientific term for them is. They're chain extinctions, that when one thing goes extinct, another thing follows quickly because it's part of like an ecological collapse cycle. Right. So a good example, in the monsters chapter is that we talk about how if dragons go extinct, the very next thing to go extinct are kobolds. Right. Because kobolds rely on dragons as part of their ecological niche. Like, we are only alive because there's a big scary thing behind us keeping us from getting hunted by everything, because we're the weakest monsters around. So without dragons, kobolds would have to live with aboleths or maybe liches, and they're not going to survive. Right. Like they've lost their major ecological tentpole. So we do address these sorts of things because they happen in the real world. Every single one of these cool story hooks around what happens when an animal goes extinct or when a monster goes extinct is just taken from examples that we've read about and that we've talked about in the book.
I also wonder about social interactions as well. For example, if the characters or a character becomes recognized as having killed the last of the species, some might kind of regard it with awe, you hunted down the last one. Others, a druid or a cleric of a certain pantheon, might go, "You did what?" So
I know. It would be. It's. I feel like there needs to be some sort of curse around this.
I was thinking.
I want to bring up a real world example. Did I tell you guys about the Great Auk last time?
No.
I don't think
the Great Auk. The Great Auk is this seabird. For those who weren't here last time, the Great Auk was this seabird. It was really, really swift in the water. They look like a very tall penguin with this really unique beak shape. They were in.
I'm showing it on the Kickstarter. I'm showing the screen grab of your Kickstarter at the minute. So
fantastic!
So you've got the one on the left, and you've got the sort of kind of ice blasting out of the.
Yeah, so we reimagined it as this ocean master because they were in this icy area around Iceland. They were in these huge numbers until Europeans realized that their feathers made great pillows, and then their numbers fell rather quickly, as anything industrial overutilization will do. The last colony of them was on this island called Geirfugalasker. Garfowl Rock is how that would translate. And in 1830, a volcano blew it up. And the very last ones, the very last family of them that escaped the volcano eruption went to a different island, LD Island, which was a lot easier for Europeans to access. And 3 people whose names are recorded in history showed up on that island. It was John Bradson, Sigfor Sidgur Ifilson, and Kettleson. Icelandic names. I'm doing my best. They showed up on the island and killed the last three. John and Sidgur strangled the adults, and Kettleson crushed the eggs beneath his boot. And there was a quote, like they wrote down exactly what they did and how they did it. I caught it close to the edge, a precipice many fathoms deep. I took him by the neck and he flapped his wings. He made no cry. I strangled him. Because they were being sent to collect specimens of the very last one. And that to me seems like it is a crime that doesn't have a name.
Yeah.
And in a D&D sense, it should be a curse. It should be that is a thing that is so dramatically cruel, being the single thing to exterminate a species. There isn't a word for that. There isn't a consequence for that. I keep running into examples in this book of things that are terrible enough that we don't have words for them.
I mean, in a realm where there's like a pantheon of gods, it's surely there must be one of a god of nature. So should the god of nature and turn around and go, I don't like you.
Yes, exactly.
A debuff of some sort. I don't know. It'd have to be.
I mean, there would be druids hunting you down for the rest of your life. One would expect. One of the things we have in the book is a god of the Paleosapiens who has gone mad and is just kind of wandering around.
It just reminds me of in the Bulgariad books by David Eddings, where there was a god that had gone mad because she'd lost all her followers of this race, and in the process of the book, in the process of the book, they found one of the last remaining people of her kind and managed to kind of rejuvenate her.
Yeah, I mean that's the idea. If there's only one left, you could use this character, and we based it on the Carolina parakeet, which. When the last one died, they froze the specimen and sent it by mail to the Smithsonian. It got lost in the mail. So we made this god, this like resplendent feathered god of, the feathered, Paleosapiens, and frozen in grief, frozen in insanity, because the last specimen of that bird is just lost, frozen. Yeah. We never get to see him again. And that's not the only time an endling specimen has just been lost in the mail, which is the most buck wild thing you can ever imagine showing up at the dead letter office.
That's insane. That's insane.
Killed by lost in post.
Yeah. Or the legacy, certainly.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
These are things that it's been extremely enriching to create a book that can tap into these ideas and expose people to these ideas through the medium of D&D, through the medium of something that I hope people, that gamers are certainly doing all the time. But it is also, occasionally kind of grim, and you find yourself wondering, like, how have I not been taught about this my entire life? How is this not something that is talked about around every dinner table every night? A bunch of the animals in this book went extinct in the last 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And they have cool stories. These aren't all from like the 1800s. We're focusing on stuff that's in like recent memory, but it gets really, really recent. I mean, gosh, when did Tuffy go extinct? Tuffy, the last fringe-limbed tree frog. 2016.
Wow, that's chilling. Well, yeah, I mean, it's true. Yeah, I mean, we are losing species at an alarming rate, at a scarily alarming rate.
It's instructive to think about it as it's instructive to look at them in single numbers.
Yeah.
To really appreciate how each animal was unique in ways that the ecosystem just hasn't created again since, and not think about the total number and the rate of things, because it quickly becomes this idea that 100 deaths is a tragedy, but 1 million is a statistic. The same thing becomes true for extinctions. And I think this sort of book that, both educates you about biology as a whole and then is very illustrative of these individual animals, is more effective than thinking about the broader statistics. That's something we think about a lot, is like, how do we convey these ideas in a way that doesn't make you just shut down?
I say when you don't, it's no longer a number. When you give them a story, they become a personality and have background, and they have meaning when you give them a story.
And that's the reason we like focusing on endlings. And I don't say but that's the reason it's instructive to focus on endlings. The last thylacine was Benjamin. The last passenger pigeon was Martha. They've got names. The last Pinta Island giant tortoise was Lonesome George, so named because he didn't participate in his own breeding experiment.
Yeah.
Potentially gay tortoise. But each of these personalities actually. So not to just directly plug a product, but we found a really lovely artist that made pins of these endlings.
Oh, nice.
And so there are these little, like, really gorgeous enamel pins that we're selling as a tier on the Kickstarter. So you can have a little pin of the last thylacine, and it's this lovely illustration with the endling's name and the year that they went extinct.
Oh, yeah.
They're really, really lovely, and I think it was the best sort of, like, with Kickstarters, it's often hard to find like products that fit the overall thing that you're doing without feeling too commercial. And I think this was I'm really proud of how we tied that in. I think anybody who's interested in this book would be happy to pick up a pack of those enamel pins.
Yeah. How are you finding the Kickstarter going? How's it been going for you?
Oh, you're kicking its ass at the minute.
I'm pretty thrilled about it. It's not the largest Kickstarter we've ever had, but it was a niche product, and I think it's safe to say that we found our audience.
Yeah.
So I mean, right now we're at 24 days to go, and we're at 87,000. So for the audience listening at home, if you're at all interested in this project, go to deadmonstermanual.com. It'll redirect you to the Kickstarter page. I think it's doing really, really well. We actually only planned up updates, stretch goals up to 100,000. I am trying to figure out right now more animals we can put in the book. Most of the stretch goals are, we're going to add this specific animal. Maybe I'll add a couple more endlings. Maybe I'll expand the megafauna chapter with a few big monsters. Monsters, animals, but they kind of act like, we're literally like megafauna from history are like giant animals in D&D. Like they're 1-to-1 in some cases. Those just get to be in the book unchanged. Like we just stat up how big they are and how dangerous they are, and that's the monster. So those are really neat. So I think the Kickstarter is going really well. I think people have really been embracing this, which is extremely, extremely heartening to see, because I was really worried it was just going to fly past people.
Yeah.
Because it's so different. I don't think anyone's ever done something quite like this before.
No, I've never heard of any kind of book where they kind of looked at extinctions as a, for want of a better term, game mechanic.
It's an amazing. Talking about it now, I am totally putting in an animal of some sort. See if my party try to kill it, and then if they do, I can just hear your brain sparking with ideas here. Yeah. I'm just like, I'm totally going to do that. I'm definitely adding something in, and it's an amazing mechanic. So good. Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd almost played Draken as a endling, to be honest. Yeah. Because I had him from a kind of a very much a subjugated background and everything. But I thought, wouldn't it be cool to kind of gone all the way and have him as one of the last? That would have been just cool. But it's a very simple. It's a very simple premise, and I don't think it's the first I've heard of it, and it's so good. And like I said, it's so powerful. Even for player characters, and for the repercussions of what it might have on the creatures that your party literally just kill because they're in their way and they don't have any thought behind it and stuff. And it's they're really two really good mechanics that make your party think about things as they're going along. Yeah. But also the stories they can tell purely from that premise is just fantastic. I think that absolutely. And then you do just get, at the end of the day, a good
bestiary of interesting monsters, right? And whether or not you really want to inject your campaign with that sort of pathos, that's up to you. But like, hey, we've got, the golden toad is a frog, a really, really vibrant yellow frog that went extinct not very long ago. And we got to turn it into a Midas frog that turns you into gold. And,
Nice.
so we just got a lot of really great monster ideas on the page inspired by these things. So I think it works equally well just as a great D&D supplement. And at this point, I've had a ton of experience just writing solid D&D supplements. So I'm really proud of what we have here outside of this fantastic pathos that the book brings to the fore. Yeah, I mean, I'm really thrilled about the reception it's gotten so far.
And what's your timeline proposed timeline for the book and the Kickstarter?
I want to have all of the PDFs done by the end of this year, and then about a year for physical manufacturing.
Okay.
Every time we try to promise 6 months for the physical manufacturing side, it always ends up being closer to a year because of random delays and, oh, well, they're out of products they're out of paper this month because of worldwide events, or, okay, we need to go back and forth and get, something correct. So we're aiming for early 2025, but I think all of the content will be done and out to people by the end of the year. That's the goal. It's hard to say. It really depends on how many additional stretch goals we hit and what we sort of end up promising. We're being cautious. We're not over promising things. We've had a lot of experience running Kickstarters before, but it's one of those rare circumstances in which the book isn't finished, so we have a lot of malleability in how we approach it.
I think I prefer being conservative with times. Like I was thinking about this yesterday because I've got so many Kickstarters that have gone well over their time and are carrying on, and they sort of kind of promised the world and you didn't get it. So when I looked at yours, and it's 2025, I think, for like the full physical product and everything coming out, which I think is a good thing because it's managing people's expectations instead of kind of going, we'll have it out in 3 months, and then you don't.
And if I can crush that timeline, like I'm going to work hard to do that, but we'll see. Ultimately, like I want to make sure that it's done right. And I want to make sure, and everybody, pledges to it, is going to get those digital products as we refine them and they get to see it and kind of give us that feedback. The big thing is always the physical kind of distribution, fulfillment stuff. That always takes a sort of unpredictable amount of time. So having a very long tail on it means ideally we'd like to get everything out by the end of the month. If people pledge, I'm going to send them what we have. I'm going to polish up that 150-page prototype, trim a couple of the incomplete sections out, and show you, I think we're probably at 70 complete monster entries. I think we're over 100 monsters in the book. I have to count that up. We have a lot. It's kind of a whole bunch. So I think people are going to really enjoy seeing what we have so far.
Yeah, I mean, and will the book be then, once the Kickstarter is complete and all the backers have received their pledges, will the book then be for sale through your Joyful RPG and Mage Hand Press? Yeah,
and directly on magehandpress.com and also on other places as we decide to put it up. Also, once the book is off Kickstarter, I can freely pledge to donate a percentage. It's probably going to be 10%, maybe a little bit more, to go directly to the Center for Biological Diversity. We can't do that right now according to Kickstarter's rules. But we're going to do that in the future. So helping us get this over the finish line means we'll be able to donate, a substantial portion of what we earn to conservation organizations.
Because we did a couple of charity-based sort of Kickstarter things. They weren't massive, like for cancer research and stuff like that, and we couldn't do it on Kickstarter because they wouldn't let us do charities, and it was weird.
It's definitely the culture that they've created and kind of what they're trying to aim for. They're trying not to be GoFundMe, which is either a positive or a negative thing, but it's certainly the niche. I don't begrudge Kickstarter for doing that. I get it. And I found, the best solution that I can. If you want to donate right now, go to the Center for Biological Diversity. I have a link on the Kickstarter page. They deserve your support more than I do. They are a great organization that fights like hell to save animals from extinction. So I'm thrilled to be working with them. I'm happy to push people over in that direction. If you're somebody who just wants to kind of like help spread awareness, back my Kickstarter. I think it's a really great way to introduce people, young and old. We haven't even talked about this as a product that you can just slide in front of a kid and leave it there and then they will suddenly become way more interested in biology and animals overnight. And I don't think that these ideas of extinction and the various things that people do to kind of drive extinction are too scary for kids. I think
No.
it's a part of the world that people should be exposed to much younger. I think I'm pretty excited about this as sort of an educational product as well.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, as soon as you embed educational elements in a role play, there's a lot more to it because you get them directly involved and you engage the pupil.
Yeah, there's this idea that we keep running into as we were designing the book of this is exactly the same as a field guide, like a book that is just full of birds or a book that is just full of things you might see in the woods. But it's a magical version of that, right? That's what a monster manual has always been. And if only it was like the monster manual of D&D was an educational resource, so many kids would be so smart. So I think we found a really cool way to do that in a way that hopefully will make a difference and help people start thinking about these things from a pretty young age.
Absolutely. And I mean, I just like the idea of like the repercussions of like the loss of a species on a game world, and like what we talk about in the a curse or like some debuff, as Matt's been. I mean, I remember playing back in the day Vampire the Masquerade, where one of the greatest crimes a vampire could commit would be diablerie, where they kind of not just drain another vampire, but actually drain their soul and everything into their very being. And anybody that could see aura could see these like kind of black lines through their aura, denoting that they committed some horrific act. So something like that, just kind of like to highlight this person, that thing over there has just done the most horrendous thing and ended the entire species.
I'll put it in the book as a sidebar. I think it's a really good idea, and it's fantastic that we're able to kind of talk about it and explore some of those angles. Because, yeah, I mean, I think it needs to be a curse of some sort. It needs to be something that is a marker, and I don't think we have a good word for it. Like it's so profound. It's
there's so much you could do with it, because if you've got something like I'm like, again, my brain's just kind of going. I'm thinking, you just put something in front of them, and if they do kill it, then they get this curse, they get this debuff, and then the only way they can get rid of that is basically they have to follow a quest to get them redemption. They will never fully get rid of the taint from it, so there will always be something, but they can kind of mitigate something, but they have to go through this sort of process.
I don't think they should ever be able to completely lose it. Because that would almost lessen the impact of
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real permanence to extinction in a way that like death doesn't really equate. Right. Sacrificing yourself when you're the very last one is different than sacrificing yourself, period. Killing the very last of a thing is different than just a murder. It's a complicated question. The nice thing about D&D is that, I think these kind of prompt you to create quests that help mitigate that anxiety. And then you get to come to terms with how you mitigate that within your campaign world. But now you've created stories about extinction and about de-extinction and conservation, and about never doing this again, which is all I wanted, right? Like if you can tell these stories at your table, you have prepared yourself in a real way to go tell those stories about the real world. And I think a lot of D&D does that all the time, right? We tell stories in which we're heroes and we're powerful and we can influence the world, and then we hope that carries with us to do the same in the real world. So that's the idea. That's the angle. It's high-minded. It's potentially far too high-minded.
Is it better too high than too low?
I think so.
Yeah. One thing I want to ask as well is, like, you mentioned, like, when the writer first approached you with this idea, he said it wasn't the right time. Why is now the right time for this idea?
Oh, I mean, I didn't think it was about whether or not he had the resources to make it happen.
Right.
That, it was like, hey, you're not going to be able to, monster manuals are so expensive, and you don't want to cut too many corners if this is something where you need the art to be really perfect. I think I'm glad that we've released this right before, the D&D movie. I think that it's a good counterbalance karmically to, big Hollywood productions around our favorite game. But, it's the right time for this sort of thing as climate change is like continuing to accelerate the extinction crisis. God, any days that we wait on this, there's always another news story about, another species that's really beloved in a part of the world going extinct. So there's always this impetus to kind of talk about it and spread awareness. And our goal at the end of the day here is just to spread awareness, right? That's the best thing this book can do is educate and help you experience something. So.
Yeah. Well, frankly,
I'm experiencing something now already. My brain's just kind of going, wow, I could do that. I could do that. Oh, amazing. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, you can hear I can see Matt's brain sparking away here in the background.
And one thing I love doing is fucking with my party members. Yeah,
very true.
Yeah, so oh yeah, okay, cool. Well, man, it's it looks amazing. I seldom get excited about even new D&D books, to be honest, but I'm very excited about this one.
I think that because this is something new.
Yeah.
This is not just another monster manual, or this is something very new and different, which we've not really seen before. To be fair.
Yeah, it looks awesome. Like the concept, the mechanics, just the scope for it.
The concept is entirely new and fresh.
Yeah, it was a real risk for us. I mean, it was a massive swing because we had no idea how many people were going to be both interested in D&D and this specific thing. So, if you're listening and you think, this book is for you or somebody in your life, if you know a biology major, go to deadmonstermanual.com and put in a pledge. They will enjoy this, even if they're only tangentially aware of D&D. That's the sort of the book is half really interesting stories from history that even hardcore biology people probably don't know. And they're pretty crazy. Like, we've got an entire story about the Stevens Island wren, which is a little island bird that was rumored to go extinct because of a single tabby cat named Dibbles.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
The story's actually a little more complicated than that, but there is weird backroom dealings and people like selling the specimens at trumped up prices because they're embroiling the British media in tales about this bird. There is a lot happening in history at any given moment when you're looking at these things. The stories are so fascinating and they're so crazy. It's hard to believe them. Like, they belong in a fantasy book. They belong in a monster manual. This is the correct place for them. So it's really a thrill to kind of bring this to people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm buying into it. As soon as we finish here,
Matt's backing this.
Yeah, you got another backer right there. I'll be number. What are we on now? Currently, you're
987.
On 987. Yeah, 988.
Wow, that's fantastic.
I'm really thrilled. I'm hoping we get through 100,000 pretty soon. We're at 87 right now. That would be an unqualified success for me, and we still have so much time left.
How much time is left, by the way?
24 days. 24 days.
Wow!
So
we
only launched last week, so we're doing really, really well.
Yeah, that's given that's been about a week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, I have a good friend who's running a Kickstarter right now. We're not going to catch them. It's Hit Point Press. They're doing their book of big bads. But I want to give them a run for their money. I actually wrote 3 of their big bads. So if you're interested in big bad evil guys, they have a project going on right now. They're fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I want to see us really, I want our biology people to really show up and prove that these sorts of products can be viable. That's the way we get more huge swings from little companies like us.
Amazing. Well, man, I appreciate your time again. It's super interesting. You've definitely got another backer from me, and hopefully you'll hit that 100K mark soon and exceed it. And we can only hope we get more from it. But amazing. Absolutely amazing. Like my
Yeah,
my
thank you
brain's
guys
just
so much.
my brain's just going.
Thank
Beep,
you
beep,
guys
beep,
so much
beep,
for
beep.
having me.
Yeah, anytime.
It is always a thrill.
Yeah, cheers, man. And I'll let you know how it goes. If I drop one in on my party and see what they do. But yeah, I appreciate it, man. So for me tonight, I've been Matt Geary. With me has been Peter Ray Allison.
Good night, everyone.
And our guest, Mike Holik.
Bye.
Bye.